Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the WritHer Podcast, a series where we talk about all things communication. Today and every day we celebrate women. Woo! Go us, Kathy. Go us and all women out there. So here's to shattering the glass ceiling and making history. Today we're talking about women's history since it's Women's History Month here in March and empowering women who have contributed to who we are today. Does that sound like a plan, Kathy? Awesome. Okay.
Great.
So
Sounds great. One of my favorite topics.
yes, I mean, there are so many empowering women out there through my education, you included, that I feel like we just learn from each other. And it's so great getting to build upon relationships and things like that. Women empowerment and editing and writing. It's really appreciated. So today we're going to chat about who has empowered us and, how we can empower each other, just from our personal experience. So who has empowered you, Kathy?
Well, when I think about my career, from the very first day at Cal State Fullerton, some of the most influential people who kind of helped my career along and kind of coached me were women. Faculty members and that kind of thing. But even when I was in college, one of my internships was with a magazine. It's now defunct, but it was an Orange County magazine, and the editor there asked me to stay on, essentially, or to come back when I graduated, and I said, I really appreciate that, and I would love to freelance for you. I like the idea that I pick up my newspaper in the morning and there's my byline. It's a very quick turnaround.
Yeah.
And magazines, you're working 3 or 4 months ahead. And later, of course, I ended up editing magazines as part of my job. But back then, I really was more about the short attention span. But we kept in touch, and she ended up later being the PR director at Chapman. But she was trying to balance that as a part-time job with being a full-time professor in public relations. And so she brought me in. And those jobs, as you know, higher education jobs are really hard to get. I really only had taught a year at Chapman as an adjunct, but, didn't know the lay of the land at all. And she kind of promised the powers that be, I will shepherd her along. I will give her that educational background, the
Wow.
bureaucratic knowledge, the things that you need to kind of hit the ground running in a job like that. But so I'll always be forever grateful for her, because if it wasn't for that introduction into higher ed, I never would have gotten the job at Cal State Fullerton. So, and there, of course, Paula Selleck, she's a legend.
Love
And
Paula.
she was a competitor of mine. We were both writers way back when. She worked for the LA Times and I worked for the Register, and we would see each other at like school board meetings and things like that. So we were friendly. But this is a business where, well, and I'm not sure any business is any different, but networking is like half the battle. You really
Right.
have to have that network behind you in order to really succeed in your career and to move forward.
And yeah, that makes me think, women who are new to the workforce, or those who have, like my social media specialist at work, right? I'm really trying to do the same things that were given to me, right? Like the bureaucratic knowledge. And, right now, she's a 2021 grad and she's great, super smart, great head on her shoulders. And a lot of the stuff we're working on is more so like relationship building, right? Like, if you work with this person and they do you a favor, how are, like that sort of situational experience she just hasn't had yet. So, I use it as an opportunity to really try to empower her. Like, I think there's a difference between leading someone and then empowering someone to do what they can do at their best. And I feel like as women, we can see some of the same things, like, I'll get all the time, which I'm working through at work, men not degrading what I'm doing, but sort of like not taking me seriously or not listening, So I think trying to find ways to empower other women helps me, like, not go crazy and, like, you know, think, well, I know there's a lot that we still have left to do, but I use it as an opportunity so that she can see from my example, right? Like, if someone is cutting you off, or if someone is not giving
Right,
you the time to
right.
speak, or valuing your opinion, or saying, oh, you're worrying too much, or don't think about that yet. you know I think those are some things that, as a woman, I've experienced difference in how I've just experienced that than my other male
Yeah,
colleagues.
I think it's great that you're doing that. That's the kind of influence that I think
Sure.
really matters. I mean, it's one thing to like share your expertise in terms of social media and how to do things, but it's another level when you are working to really help someone develop their skills and beyond their skills, kind of their
Yeah.
like sophistication or their behind the scenes knowledge. And then there's that whole other realm that we all deal with as women,
Hmm.
that's kind of this hidden veil almost,
Yeah.
like you were saying, I'm sorry that you're having to go through that, but the whole thing about men not really listening or being condescending or
Hmm.
not taking you seriously, it's those things I think unfortunately come with time. It's like you have to hang in there
Yeah.
and get through it, but it's good that you have each other, that she
Hmm.
has you, and you have her, because you're able to kind of bounce things off of her.
Yeah.
um, Mike and I used to do that all the time. Mike Mahi, uh, after meetings, we would kind of rehash what happened and what was this person really saying, and
Right.
did I really hear this right? But it helps to have another female around, because there is that whole undercurrent of,
Hmm.
it's just harder, and it must be the
Yeah.
same for people who are differently abled, or um, you know, of a different culture or
Hmm.
a different, race. There's always that additional, I don't know whether it's a burden so much as just an issue,
Yeah.
if you couldn't see or you couldn't walk, there would be that additional barrier to get over. And I think it's like that for women, and it's like that for minorities, and people who are from other cultures. And it's that's why it's so important to empower each other. you know
Absolutely. And you're so right too. It comes with time. And even in the short time, through Zoom learning and Zoom all remote work, it can be really frustrating, and people may not even notice when they're being, like, when they shut you down. That's one of the worst things, just for me personally. Like, if I could vent a little bit here, like, when people shut me down in a way that makes me not want to continue sharing my ideas, I feel like that's, you know more so from, I've had a lot of
so
experiences.
are you saying
Yeah.
that happens
Go
are
ahead.
you saying that that primarily happens on Zoom, or?
Yeah, I think, like, the frustration on Zoom, like, my experience over the pandemic was our team was really struggling with how to even talk on Zoom, because there's 20 of us, right? So it's like the squeaky wheel gets
Right.
the grease, right? Like, the loudest one gets the microphone, is what it felt like. So I feel like, internally people may think, oh, Jill, she's just kind of like, she's just a wild girl, she's just social media. And it's really hard to break through that perception of you when there's so much more. So I think what I've done is, like, almost like a meditation, whenever people are talking over me, or they are telling me that I don't understand something when I do. That's one of my things, is like when someone's like, you don't understand, and I do, I just have to wait for them to be done to explain to them how I understand what they're talking about. Whereas before I would be like, try to be the loudest one, and just it would just add to the aggravation. So what I try to do now is like, understand fully what this other person is saying. And I feel like, just from my experience, men may have had the opportunity to be listened to, whereas women, it's more like, oh, we've kind of heard this, or you're being a little too much right now, is what it's a little too much right now. And I feel like I have learned from you as well, and from other women in the workforce and with these great careers, how you get there is really just time, the relationship building, and I think that's something that I'm trying to pass on. So I
Yeah.
think that's great. And one of the other questions you have here is like, why is it important for women to empower each other? Because that it's so crucial. Why do you think it's
I put that in there
yeah.
because I think the perception among men in particular is that women cut each other down, that we're so competitive with each
Yeah.
other that we don't really want to see each other succeed, and that we're bitchy and
Oh yeah, she's so
and
bitchy. I hate that.
cutthroat. Um, and I think that what you touched on is really important, that it's one thing to be heard and it's another thing to be listened to.
Right.
And I think that in a great many cases, people are condescending, both men and women. They hear, they are hearing you, but in their minds, they're formulating what they want to say next. They're not really listening, And so many times you have to kind of hedge your bets, or pick your battles about, is this really an issue that I want to go to the wall for? Or is this something that I can just take a deep breath, like you said, count to 10 and move on, to kind of pick those battles. But I think it's really important for women to empower each other. It's always important for team members of whatever, ilk, to empower each other. I mean, you're part of a team, but I think with women, we know what each other face in the workplace. And that's why it's so important for us to empower each other. And in my experience, I mean, I can't even count more than one or two examples in my whole career of women who weren't supportive and happy for each other's success. I mean, there's only been a couple of instances where I can think of people playing as part of Team Woman.
Right.
They just could take you or leave you, and they wanted to succeed no matter what, and don't get in their way. But I think most women really like to see each other succeeding.
Yeah, I think I used to have a boss. They will remain nameless, but she was my first and I guess only female boss, and she was sort of like this. She took all of the stereotypes, I would say, that, and all the flack that women get for being emotional and dramatic and aggressive, and I would say, I wouldn't follow her management style just from my experience, but she was so get it done her way that she was like, well, if I'm going to be a bitch, I'm going to do it my way. And I felt like that was on the other end of the spectrum of like empowerment. It's more like tearing people down and using that as a form of, motivation, which I guess motivates some people, but like, in terms of like understanding and listening and maturity and things like that. It was sort of the opposite. So that's the experience that I had. And then I met women in the workplace like you and Lauren Williams, who's a great writer and reporter, and she works at Cal State Long Beach now. And I think a lot of the things that I learned from that situation was like, you can't control anyone, and you have to stand up for yourself. You just have to stand up for yourself. And I feel like that's something, like right now with my team and my social media specialist, I'm showing her when to step in, when to communicate those kinds of things. So it's really great. I really enjoy it.
Right. I think it's good to kind of accept going into any work situation that you're not going to like everybody you work with. You're not going to always agree with people that you work with. Who are going to have conflicts. That's the nature of the beast. But you can still have an underlying respect and consideration, even for the people that you don't get along with. And that's playing the long game. I mean, you really have to play the long game in this if you want a career that's going to last. And I can think of one woman in particular. I was on a board with her, and we conflicted from the very beginning. I mean, she just was very old school and wanted to do things the way that she wanted to do them. And she made it very clear to me. I was president, but she had been president in the past. And every new idea that I came up with was, oh, we tried that, it won't work. But this woman later became a client. And I thought that was so significant because we had an underlying respect for each other's work, and we were able to work together pretty well, despite the fact that we had these other conflicts. So I thought it was a great example of mutual respect, even if you disagree. And, I can think of several people that, I don't really, they're not my cup of tea, but I was able to work effectively with them because you just kind of have to accept that you're not going to love everybody that you work with.
And not everybody's going to love you. That was one of my hardest things.
Right.
You can't make
the
everybody
hardest part.
That's the hardest part. Why doesn't everybody love you?
Yes.
And I think that's so true. I'm so glad. See, that's so great that how someone who you may not agree with all the time, like now you can work together, and to have someone respect and appreciate your professional judgment is like one of the ultimate gifts, right? Like for me, I don't know. And I know you mentioned in here, we're going to chat about like unique gifts that women bring to the workplace, to communications, to careers, and to each other. And I was thinking about this one long and hard. And I think, I wouldn't consider myself very like maternal or nurturing, but I feel like this level of I've had two different types of experiences. One, with women in the workplace, either it's very competitive, I'm going to get you before you get me, it can get catty or like gossipy. And I always tell people, I love gossip if it's not at the expense of anybody. If it's not at the expense of anybody, like I like to know things, but I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So it's either catty, gossipy, or this super supportive, compassionate, positive relationship. So I feel like I've been in those two situations, and either it's a lack of compassion, or women, in my experience, just bring this level of like humanity and compassion, not necessarily like motherly, but like understanding, like, hey, I saw you get out of that meeting where like you got steamrolled by 3 different men the same way. Like, how are you feeling? Like, are you, like trying to listen, and that idea and sense of listening I've really gotten from a lot of my female coworkers in the past. Yeah.
We're talking about the workplace here. So the idea of nurturing, mothering,
it's like not
they don't really have their place in the workplace. However, I think that women bring certain sensitivity into any situation. And I think this is why women are so successful in helping professions, professions where you just reach out and it's your job to help other people. You have an innate sensitivity to and care for another. And I do think that that's a natural part of being a woman. It can have two sides, ultra sensitivity can be really harmful to you in the workplace as an individual. If you're very sensitive, then prone to tears or that kind of thing. I mean, it can really be
way down.
a detriment. I'm a very sensitive person, so I speak from experience that
Me
way.
too.
However, on the other side, and I think this really counterbalances it, that sensitivity, it's almost like a sixth sense. In my opinion, I get a gut feeling about things and I get an intuition about people and things. And I find that listen to that, it never goes wrong, and sometimes it's a judgment about a person or maybe a viewpoint or like the direction that something's headed. It's not been expressed, but you can tell from your woman's intuition. I hate calling it that, but that's essentially what it is. But in my experience, that sensitivity has really worked for me, so it is a double-edged sword. And I do think that women, whether or not they're moms, tend to have a nurturing side to them. And that's why relationships like yours with the social media coordinator are so strong, because you're going beyond helping her as a professional, but you're also giving her insights as a woman in the workplace. And, I think that those qualities are really, we can use them to our advantage. They can definitely be detrimental to us. I mean, I have burst into tears in the workplace more times than I would care to remember.
Me
but
too.
I think it's because if I didn't care so deeply about something or the quality of work that we're doing, then I wouldn't get so emotional about it. But, I'm emotionally involved because I care so much, and I think those qualities are good.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you be criticized for caring too much about your professionalism or the quality of creativity of your work, so
Yeah. There's so
I don't know. I think part of it too is we're in a creative industry, so creatives are a whole different ballgame when you're talking about like managing people, right? So managing a whole office full of office workers, that would be a piece of cake compared to managing creatives. I mean, you're talking about people who they're usually heavily invested in their work. They usually have a big ego about their work. They're they want their way or the highway, and they don't like to listen. So all those things, you're trying to manage these people, and it's really an uphill battle. I mean, I totally get it.
yeah. Yeah. And it's like now that I'm in this leadership role, watching people converse about challenges, it's like I try to be, not just because I'm a woman, but be like try to be positive and try to, show people that, you don't have to be like toxically positive, like everything's going to be okay, everything's wonderful, don't worry. That's too
Right.
far between that and like, okay, let's know that we have 24 hours in a day, let's break it up, because we're creatives and things like that. So I'm really appreciative too of you and working with me. And I feel like this is a great venture that we're on and it's super fun. So yeah, thanks for being here with me, Kathy.
I know, I'm really happy to hear about your challenges in the place, because I think it's really important for this to be a two-way street, not just me talking.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm learning so much from you, and I think my perspective comes with like, you know, like the networking group that you have of writers and female writers and communicators and public relations, experts and editors. I never really thought that I could fit into the world that like that. I never really thought that I mentally had the ability to tell a story, in a written word, because I was always so concerned about, more so like how something's going to look on social media. So to be able to take a step back and say, these awesome people have created these wonderful careers. What can I learn from them? I mean, that's just so empowering in general. So,
It's interesting that you mentioned that because, I hadn't thought about this in a while, but I asked my son, my oldest son is in social media marketing.
mhm.
And I once asked him, just out of curiosity, so Ben, if you were given an assignment from your boss of something you've never done before, how would you approach it? And he said, oh, I'd watch YouTube videos and figure it out.
Yep.
Okay, to me, that it's totally foreign. I mean, I do use YouTube, but I would pick up the phone and I would call somebody that I know was an expert in that part of the field and say, hey, I need to pick your brain about this. Perhaps we can collaborate, but at the very least, could you kind of walk me through this particular, thing that I have to do? Both of them are valid approaches, but I think I think the most effective one is probably a combination of the two. But you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
I grew up in a generation that didn't have internet. So you picked up the phone and you called
Yeah.
somebody.
You looked in the
That's how you got
encyclopedia.
information.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I feel like that's underrated though. I was in the generation, like my dad was really into computers, which was not the norm, I guess, for his generation. So I was raised with, he fix a dryer, look it up on YouTube. Like that's how I grew up. And I think over the years, more so now, it's less YouTube, a little more reaching out to the professionals. And I think having a good mix of both is like an understanding that both can provide so much in their areas.
So much of like what we do, you and I, is about relationships. So sometimes what I found is when I'm calling somebody for advice, it ends up that we can collaborate on a project together, or we can at least refer to each other. Like there's a guy that I know that all he does is media relations. He loves talking to reporters.
Nice.
It's just what he does, and he does it all day long. Well, media relations used to be a huge part of my work, but over the years, I've kind of gotten away from it. I like to think of myself as a virtual agency. So am I an agency? No, I'm really just one person, but I have a whole bunch of other resources I can call upon. I could put a team together, you on social media and my friend David on media relations, and I have video people and all that. So I could easily put together a team, but that's all part of networking, and it kind of goes both ways. You have to also be a resource for others. That's how that kind of works, that whole networking thing. And I think it's even more profound when it's women, because
yes,
we need to be giving each other a leg up.
Right, absolutely. And I think with exactly what you're saying, this new generation really relies heavily on YouTube, on looking things up on the internet. But what I'm trying to get at more and more is exactly that, building those relationships, because, don't let your non-relationships hold you back. You won't be able to make a relationship with YouTube, like you can use the tools, but exactly like what you're saying, 10 years down the road, if you want to expand or look for other careers or build a team and things like that. So I think absolutely I'm really empowered by the women
Yeah,
around me
I
in
remember
whatever they
I
do.
had an intern too. Uh, I had an intern or two they were too scared to pick up the phone. I mean,
Right.
literally, they did not know how to use the phone to
Yeah.
get information. And I
Scary.
thought, well, yeah, it is scary because you can't always look something up. You
Mm-mm.
sometimes you actually have to talk to a real person. But
Right.
my own daughter is that way. She's an introvert, and it's very difficult for her to put herself out there like that. But she's gotten really good at it
Good.
from practice. But
Yeah.
oh, I know. I was thinking about this when you were talking. A few of the stories that I've been doing lately have been for Behind the Badge, which is
Mm.
it's like a newsletter for first responders. So I've been doing a couple stories from the Santa Ana Police Department, and they've been regarding women. The first was a women's recruiting event where they just opened it up to women. It was on a Saturday morning. Anybody who was interested in a police job could come and talk to, they held panels of women, they had individual women speakers. It was all about women. They had a huge response. And then this last couple weekends ago, there were two back-to-back events. On Saturday, there was an event that stemmed from that first event. They started hearing from potential recruits about, I can pass the written test, I think, but I have a real problem with the physical challenge of the obstacle course and the foot race and all the things that are required physically to pass that exam
Mm.
to get to be in the academy.
Mhm.
So they had a training event where they took them through all the different parts of the police exam, the agility tests. They ranked everybody, and then they gave them little tips about how to train for the event.
Oh.
And like I talked to this woman who's a sergeant, and she's not even 5 feet tall. I mean, she's a terribly petite little thing. I said, so you did this body drag with
Yeah.
the dummy? I mean, how did you do that? And she said, it's all in the leverage. I learned to get down and leverage my legs. And yes, I did it. So their aim is, they have this new initiative called 30 by 30. They want 30% of the whole police force to be women by 2030. They've got a
Nice.
huge way to go because there's only I think they said 34 police officers who are women in the department, and the department has hundreds of people. So supportive of each other. I mean, not competitive at all. They're like, let's do this. It
Nice.
was just a wonderful esprit de corps kind of woman power event. And it kind of set me up for this talk because very inspiring.
That's wonderful. It's like, sometimes as a woman, I feel lonely sometimes. But, in my feelings, as the kids would say, when you're in your feelings. But
Right.
that's kind of like, it reminds me of when I did roller derby, like I went and I saw these women that I never thought, I was not athletic at all. So when I saw these women that were so strong and they were so strategic and they were so agile, you know, um, it was really inspiring, so inspiring that I was like, I have to try this. And I think it made me so much stronger mentally, physically.
Oh
And
yeah, I
yeah,
can't even imagine.
and
Yeah.
that type of women empowerment is so infectious. And I think that's really what kickstarted my almost need to share more women empowerment and just empower other
Yeah.
women, because at a certain point,
No, I don't think a lot
yeah,
of people, a lot of women have never been on an athletic team, like me
right.
in particular. I never was a sports person growing up. The only sport I was ever good at was something individual, like skiing.
Oh, but that's still
But I
good.
think the fact that you were part of a team like that is so important in the workplace because,
Yeah.
you know, let's face it, if you're a team member, a lot of the strategies and, you know, the things that are happening behind the scenes, you know, a lot more about that because you were on an athletic team. I
And
really think it's a huge advantage.
oh, thank you. I mean, it was really, really hard, like to start, really
Oh yeah,
intimidating.
can't
Like,
even imagine.
had no idea how to roller skate, and I was called fresh meat, and I'm like walking on my skates, and these women are like hitting each other, side swiping, and I'm like, they could have totally looked at me and been like, "We don't want you here. Your competition." And it was kind of like the opposite in a sense. It was like, your competition, I want to make you better so that I'm better. I want you to be my best competition, but at the end I know I'll be my best. So it was a really empowering, and I think absolutely I've taken that and just tried to do some very similar things in the workplace. So it's been a real joy. I enjoy it
I
being a
think,
woman.
you know, some women get that kind of experience maybe in drama
Yeah.
or like the student newspaper
Mhm.
or things that we do together. But I don't think that that's as valuable necessarily as being on a team like that, especially one that's that competitive and that female driven. I think that really gives you a huge amount of insight in the workplace because of that experience.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've played against at Cal State Fullerton. I have run into professors on campus that I played against,
Really?
and I think it's so funny because, regardless of the score, at the end of the day, we both go to work and we're like, "Ah, yeah, it was so great," and it's just a great vibe, and I learned so much about how to be strong from these people, and I'm just excited to continue doing it to it, Kathy. So, I mean, like, women empowerment, it shouldn't be just March. Wouldn't you agree? It should be all year.
Right. Yes, I agree. I agree. I think it needs to be a lifestyle.
A lifestyle here on the WriteHer podcast. Can you tell where we're going, everybody? Alrighty, everybody, stay tuned for another episode each month of the WriteHer Podcast. Be sure, everyone, to follow Kathy Douglas on Spotify, on YouTube, and all of her social media channels for communications, PR, and editing tips. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.